Alright, hey guys, Nick here, and today we're gonna be starting off the series of sneak peek reactions. Hopefully, I'll be doing one for most updates. Probably not every update because I tend to be unavailable from time to time, but right now I can, so I thought why not? I usually just like yapping about the characters that we're getting, where I expect their place in the meta is going to end up looking like, and just the general how I feel and the sort of vibes I get from the sneak peeks. Not a lot of games actually do sneak peeks, and that's why MFF is, it hits very close to home because they've been doing this for, I don't know, like a decade now, maybe more. And they're just so nice, so personal. It's such a nice commercial tactic, such a nice marketing tactic, and they always get us excited even a whole week earlier than when the update arrives. I've found that as a live service game, it's pretty important to build up that excitement over time, and I think MFF does it very well through sneak peeks. This one, however, I mean, we'll talk about it in a second. It's not their best work, but it's still a really nicely animated one. So let's take a look, although you guys have probably seen it already. Um, just for the people who haven't, this is for you. We can see Miss Valkyrie. You can see Odin with Dropnir, I think, the spear. Or like Gungnir. I think Dropnir was a. I think Dropnir is Kratos' spear from God of War Ragnarok. So Gungnir is probably the name of Odin's spear. I'm actually not 100% sure. But I'm also not going to check that right now. So the fidelity of the sneak peek is definitely not the best. I'm pretty sure they went ahead and reused the same map that they used for the Hella sneak peek. Or actually, was it a Hella sneak peek? No, it was something else. We had like another Asgardian update where somebody was walking on the Bifrost. Um, I don't remember. It was so long ago, but this map does feel familiar. The character models do look very nice though. Um, this is how Valkyrie looks. I much prefer the blonde version of Valkyrie that is akin to the comics as opposed to Tessa Thompson's version. Not because I'm racist, I just personally like this look a bit more. Um, Odin is an absolute giga chad. I absolutely adore the detail on this uniform. This is, I think, about as cool as it can get for an MFF hero asset. So I'm pretty impressed with the armor details, with the asymmetry going on, and just the overall fidelity of the uniform, and also the way the cape is animated, and you can even see the textures on it, like the cloth textures on it. Very nice. And then last but certainly least is actually Gore. And Gore does not look as good as he does in other uniforms. I much prefer his classic look where it's white robes as opposed to this black armor. Hopefully, we're gonna get that somewhere down the line, but still, he does look pretty menacing. And if you guys are wondering, he's not completely bald. These are actually his ears, and they're kind of like falling behind him, kind of like hair, because that's the way his alien race actually operates. Like that's how their biology operates. And then he's holding a sword that is probably the Necro sword, so the same sword that Null has. And then the VFX here is very nice. You can see the ears of Gore here, kind of like Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars. That's pretty cool. And then the VFX of the sword being purple, very nice. And then Odin and Valkyrie getting ready for battle. So yeah, I mean it's overall not a bad sneak peek. I personally prefer others, but I guess it serves the job of getting us hyped up for the next update. Now, first impressions are this is going to be an expensive update, right? Um, we're not getting the Eternals, we're not getting any of these sort of normal characters like Thor. We're also not getting Jean Grey, who we thought would be potentially the most expensive uniform if we were getting that Avengers versus X-Men versus Eternals sort of update, but we're not getting that. We're actually just straight up getting Gods of Asgard versus Gore, the God Butcher himself. And it's not that I don't prefer this update. I actually really like the Asgardians and Norse mythology in general. Probably my second favorite after Greek. But it's just I'm not sure if this is the right time for this update. And there's a very obvious reason behind why they're doing it, and it's to basically drain our resources right after we've spent all of them for the anniversary. Because all of these characters are probably going to be very, very strong, and for people who want to compete in the meta, they might even be must buys. So to start things off with Valkyrie, you can see that I actually didn't pick up the uh, Love and Thunder uni, and I'm still with the Fearless Defenders one, just because I like the blonde look of Valkyrie a lot more. I can kind of see why they're bringing another uniform for her, but also at the same time, it's kind of needless. Valkyrie only really needed a tier 4, and I think if anything, they should start, putting out tier 4s, especially for these support characters that don't really need or require a uniform, just so that we could use them in the proper content, right? Because that's the main reason Valkyrie is getting updated. And they should instead save the uniform for another character. Like, for example, one of the Warriors 3, right? We're not getting Volstagg, we're not getting Fandral, we're not getting whatever the third guy's name was, Hogan. We're not getting any of those clowns. Um, we're not getting an Enchantress uniform. Characters who are, pretty dog water compared to Valkyrie. Valkyrie is still seeing so much play in even in PvP content like Timeline Battle, or sorry, not Timeline Battle, but like TBA, AC, and no, Siri, I did not want you to activate. Oh my god, I hate iOS so much. Anyways, I digress. Um, but that's just generally how I feel. Like I'm probably still gonna buy the Valkyrie uniform just because I wanna have her latest uniform, but it's probably gonna be later down the line, not when it comes out next week. Um, as far as what I expect, I think she's gonna be probably the best option for ABX and ABO after Crescent. I think she might be a little bit better than Hope, just because she now has access to tier 4. Um, but I don't expect her to overtake Crescent. I still think she's just gonna be mainly a support. An interesting aspect of Valkyrie that often isn't talked about is her iframe ignore skill. If they actually do something with her in PvP, that would be very nice, but overall Valkyrie is a PvE support, as you can see by her artifact, and generally speaking, the main use for her in the meta was ABX ABO and world boss climbing, and it's been that way for many years now. So that's pretty much my 2 cents on Valkyrie. Like it's nice that she's getting a uniform, but I think other characters would have gotten a bit more out of that uniform slot than her. Netmarble could have easily just given a tier 4 to Valkyrie without giving her uni and then saved that uniform for somebody else. Um, I want to talk about Odin next because I actually don't have him built up, so let me go to him right here. He's still stuck at level 60. I didn't even buy his newest uniform because I just didn't see a point in investing in him. He wasn't even that much better than Thor when he came out, so I much preferred the free-to-play option. And I also don't really have the resources to tier for him, or I didn't at the time, so he's kind of just been sitting on the back burner. He's one of my most neglected characters on the roster. And it's not because I don't like Odin. I do like him, and I think he's amazing because of his unique passive that gives him immunity to cancel, his whopping 60% skill damage, and the fact that he has a pretty nice PvP leadership that could be uniquely positioned against an elemental character like Madeline Pryor. But despite all of that, Odin has always been made lacking something. In all of his uniforms, he's been really good, but like not meta. I can't explain why Netmarble keep doing it, and I honestly think they're gonna pull that shit again. But essentially, they make him like an 8 out of 10 character without pushing him to the 9 or the 10, which is usually just him being ABX, ABL meta. That's kind of the issue with these universal characters, the cosmic beings, the Asgardians in general. It's that they all kind of compete with each other because they're the same typing, right? They're all universal aliens, and especially now that Loki is also a hero, you have Thor, Odin, and Loki all competing for the same archetype of a character, and you also have like alien villains like for example No or Loki's old uniform competing with Gore. So it's just a lot of overlap that I think Netmarble needs to find a way to avoid. And I think the main way of doing that is through content, not, um, of course, just switching the characters typing to something else, because that would be very lame. These characters should remain universal aliens, but the content should somehow differentiate between all of them. Because the thing with Odin is, if he gets this uniform and he's really good for world boss, right? Let's call him like a Human Torch, maybe even better than Human Torch world boss character. So he's absolutely incredible for world boss. But Loki, a character that costs 1000 crystals and half the tier 4 resources, outscores him in ABX and ABL, right? Hypothetically speaking, if Odin doesn't become meta for ABX and ABL. A lot of players just don't see a point in investing in this character, and I can't blame them. And in fact, I'm going to be one of them. This character has zero value for PvP because they refuse to give him iframe ignore or actually decent skills for that content. And although he has, flashes of brilliance with very high damage reduction, very high skill damage bonus damage, a nice PvP leadership, and immunity to cancel, they always position him for PvE. And yet, when they positioned him for PvE, they just make him deal high amounts of damage, but that's kind of what Thor already does. And Thor just gets more uniforms than Odin anyways, so he is kind of more poised to be good for World Boss most of the time. So Odin's just always been in this awkward slot where he's not good enough, and I'm afraid he's gonna be there again. Unfortunately, it's make or break for him. They either position him for PvP and use him there, like, but I doubt that's gonna happen. I think they're just gonna keep him a PvE character, and that's mostly it. If you go to his details, they do put him as a leader, or sorry, as a dealer in PvP, but he's just always been terrible in PvP because he has no iframe ignore. Um, so if he doesn't outscore Loki, I genuinely don't see a point to upgrading this character. If he does outscore Loki, then we're talking because then you could say some people prefer Loki because he's much cheaper, right? But others prefer Odin because he's better, albeit more expensive. But still, it, the proportions are now correct, right? The more expensive character deals more damage, or I guess in this case, scores higher. World Boss is just not enough of a barometer for Odin to be a better character than Loki, especially considering how useful Loki is as a striker. And this is all without even considering the possibility of Thor getting a uniform, because this is an Asgardian update after all. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But even if he doesn't get one now, he will get one at the end of the year for Doomsday, because Thor is like a prime he's like one of the main characters of the movie. Of course he's gonna get a fucking uniform. And at that point, we might even have tier 5 on the table, at which in which scenario Odin is just not gonna be able to keep up with a character who has access to level 90, right? Because that's just the way content works. The moment you upgrade your Thor to level 90, if he's tier 5able, um, yeah, mathematically Odin can't keep up. So, and then the other issue is if they do make him better than Loki for ABX ABL, then completely they completely delete the value of the Immortals of Olympus epic quest. Because if Odin completely replaces Zeus as well, because right now you can kind of make an argument that Zeus is as good as Loki if you have a max build on him, like some people like using Zeus. But I honestly think it's just a coping mechanism because of the amount of crystals you spend for him. But if Odin also replaces Zeus, then that epic quest is just dead in a ditch. And yeah, not sure if Netmarble are going to want to do that. So I'm kind of worried about Odin, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be investing in him, but we'll see. Of course, the character that I'm most excited about is Gore. You know, as a PvP player, Gore was the best of the native tier 3s for PvP, even better than Sentry. He wasn't when he came out, but through upgrades, they updated him I think 3 times. He's one of the last characters who received reworks after their release. He became really good, right? And there's a few aspects of Gore that make him amazing. So the first one is the fact that he has native super guard break immunity. So he can't get guard broken. He can get debuffed, which is, has become basically the new meta where characters just outlive each other and then they start debuffing the opponent. But in terms of super guard break, for example, a character like Madeline Pryor is very, very annoying, or Adam Warlock because of their super guard break. Gore just um, ignores that. Now, it's possible that they removed that aspect of him because they did it for Sentry. Sentry also used to have super guard break, but then they removed it, probably because he would have been too strong if he had it. Um, so they might do the same thing for Gore, but there's a decent chance they keep it in there. Other than that, Gore is just an already really well-made character. He has additional peers. Damage reduction, they're probably gonna bump that up to 45. He has a revive. Maybe they're gonna bump that up to 100. He has a self-heal, like a healing factor like Wolverine. So there's a decent chance they buff this as well to like 6%, so he might be even tankier than the other native tier 3s. He does not have a heal on his basic skills. That is one aspect of Gore that is different than the other characters. But if this is a good enough passive, and if the CTP of Conquest works as well with him as I think it will, then we might be looking at the newest, tankiest PvP character, especially considering his amazing leadership that gives extra HP on top of debuff cleanse. Um, and yeah, I think he might even be tankier than Sentry. But overall, like his skills are already very good. They just need to bump the hit count a bit more. And they need to make sure that his second skill is as stacked as basically every other character's second skill. Like it needs to have incapacitation, which I think it already does. It needs to have some other sort of debuff. It needs to have invincibility. It needs to have removes all debuffs for, a second or two or four in Kang's case. Maybe the ambush proc, maybe a little frenzy buff like Kang has here. But, you know, just a little something that makes the second skill very lethal, very challenging for enemies to survive through. Um, and I think they're just gonna do that exactly for Gore, and I think that's gonna be more than enough. It will be interesting to see how he fits into the TBA meta, like who he counters, because No wasn't able to counter Kang. Is Gore going to be able to? And if that's the case, does No counter Gore? We can't be sure. We can't really be sure. But the good news is Gore is a physical attacker. And Kang does have lower physical defense than what's his name? No. Oh, actually my Kang has well, that's because of my cards. Okay, if you have energy defense on your cards, is I promise by default Kang's energy defense is higher. Oh, not by much though. Okay, never mind. Um, but yeah, that's with Gore pretty much done. Um, we might be looking at the quadrifecta, if that's even a word in the English language, of native tier threes. And honestly, because Thanos is due for a new uniform, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year we also get Black Swan tier 4. And then that would essentially complete all the native tier 3s with uniforms without us getting a single native tier 4 character in the game, which is quite tragic. But I guess Netmarble want to keep these characters meta. And yeah, I mean, I'm not completely against it, but I also think it would be nice to start seeing some of these more classic characters coming back to the PvP scene, because it's been a while since we've seen some of them, right? And yeah, I kind of miss the more cheaper, more approachable PvP that we used to have before. And I really don't want to turn this into a native tier 3 versus native tier 3 versus native tier 3 fiasco, because if Black Swan also gets a uni and she's also as good as the others, the TBA teams are just gonna be one team No, one team Sentry, one team Gore, one team Kang, and one team Black Swan. And that's absurd, right? Where's the variety in that? Where is the variety in that? The good news is I have a 5-star Gore artifact, which actually is incredible since it also buffs his damage against Sentry. So I hope he's very good against Sentry himself. The bad news is he does have the healing tag, which does get banned from time to time in TBA. The other two are fine. He is also evil, so that's another extra buff to artifacts that have increases basic damage to evil characters. I don't think I have one as an example, but no, my cap is also leadership. But yeah, I think that's the gist of it. I'm not gonna keep yapping much longer. Let me know what you guys think about Mr. Gore, Mr. Odin, and Mrs. Valkyrie. Um, how strong do you think Gore is gonna be compared to the other native tier 4s? Because I think he might actually be the best one of the bunch. Right now, you can kind of argue that it's Kang, but you can also kind of argue that it's Sentry at his best. You can even make an argument for No, specifically for content like Alliance Conquest, because immortality characters are a bit better, I would say, in Conquest than revive characters. But I'm curious to see how Gore does things because of his lack of normal healing and just healing factor, right? Because he's gonna be more like Wolverine. And if we're looking at a native tier 3 Wolverine, then I think we might be looking at trouble. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.